Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The deadbolt snapped with a sound like a gunshot, shattering the illusion of safety Julian had spent 3 agonizing years building. He didn't even have time to reach for the kitchen knife before the heavy oak door swung inward, hitting the wall with a violence that shook the cheap plaster of the apartment. Julian froze, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, his breath hitching in his throat. Standing in the doorway, framed by the stormy gloom of the hallway and the flickering fluorescent light, was a figure that haunted his every nightmare and every desperate, lonely fantasy. The man was soaked from the torrential rain, his bespoke black suit clinging to a frame of corded muscle, his silver-gray eyes glowing with a predatory luminescence that cut through the shadows. The scent hit Julian a split second later. Burnt cedar, rain, and the metallic tang of old blood. It was a pheromone signature so powerful, so dominating, that Julian's knees threatened to buckle. It was the scent of the alpha who had claimed him, ruined him, and forced him to run. Did you really think? Kalen Vane's voice was a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. That a few 100 miles and a fake surname could hide you from me? Julian backed away until his spine hit the cold edge of the kitchen counter. Kalen, get out. Get out. Kalen stepped into the room, kicking the door shut behind him with his heel. The sound locked them in a suffocating bubble of tension. He looked around the cramped, peeling living room with a sneer of aristocratic disdain before his gaze snapped back to Julian, pinning him in place. You stole something from me, Julian. In my world, theft is punishable by death. But for you, I might be persuaded to find a different punishment. I stole nothing, Julian hissed, fighting the biological urge to bare his neck, to submit to the sheer gravity of the alpha's presence. I left. There is a difference. You belong to the Vane Syndicate. You belong to me. Kalen took a step closer, the air around him crackling with suppressed rage. I tore this city apart looking for you. I burned down rival territories just on the rumor you were there. And here you are, living in squalor. It was peace, Julian countered, his voice trembling. It was safe. Safe. Kalen laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. You possess the mark of the most dangerous man on the continent, yet you think you are safe without my protection? You are a lamb wandering in a forest of wolves, Julian. Just then, a sound pierced the thick tension. A soft, sleepy whimper coming from the bedroom down the hall. The blood drained from Julian's face. Kalen froze. The alpha's head snapped toward the hallway, his eyes narrowing. The scent of burnt cedar spiked, becoming sharper, more aggressive. Who is here? No one, Julian lied, moving to block the hallway. Leave, Kalen. But an alpha of Kalen's caliber could not be deceived. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. Underneath the scent of fear and rain, there was something else. A scent that was milky, soft, yet undeniably linked to his own genetic signature. Move, Kalen commanded. The word wasn't a request. It was an order that struck Julian's nervous system like a whip. No! Julian grabbed Kalen's arm, desperate. Please, Kalen. Don't. Kalen effortlessly caught Julian's wrists, pinning them against his chest with one hand. He leaned down, his face inches from Julian's. You are hiding someone. A lover? His eyes darkened with murderous jealousy. If there is another alpha in that room, I will paint these walls with him. It's not a lover, Julian cried out, tears stinging his eyes. Kalen shoved Julian aside, not roughly enough to bruise, but with enough force to clear his path. He strode down the short hallway and pushed open the bedroom door. Julian scrambled after him, his heart in his throat. The room was dim, lit only by a star-shaped nightlight. Inside the crib that took up most of the space, a toddler was sitting up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The boy had Julian's soft, dark curls, but when he looked up at the towering figure in the doorway, the eyes that blinked back were unmistakable. They were silver gray, cold steel, currently wide with curiosity. Kalen stood paralyzed. For the first time in his life, The ruthless head of the vain crime family looked struck dumb. He gripped the doorframe, his knuckles turning white. "Leo," Julian whispered, rushing past Kalen to scoop the child up. He held the boy tight against his chest, shielding him. "His name is Leo." Kalen turned slowly to look at Julian. The rage was gone, replaced by a chaotic storm of shock, confusion, and a dawning, terrifying possessiveness. "Mine. He's my son," Julian said defiantly. "He has my eyes," Kalen whispered, his voice cracking. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out almost involuntarily before he balled it into a fist and dropped it. "You kept my son from me? You hid an heir to the syndicate in a rat-infested apartment." "I hid him from the violence," Julian shouted, the dam breaking. "I hid him from the blood, the enemies, the constant threat of death. I didn't want him to grow up wondering if his father would come home or if he'd be sent back in a box." "So you denied him his birthright?" Kalen's voice rose, the alpha command slipping back in. "You denied him his father? I chose his life over your ego." The air in the room grew heavy, the pressure almost unbearable. Kalen stared at the child, at Leo, who was now hiding his face in Julian's neck. The sight of the boy's fear seemed to wound Kalen more than any bullet ever had. Kalen took a deep breath, reining in his pheromones until the scent was merely a dull thrum of cedar. He adjusted his cuffs, the mask of the Don sliding back into place. "Pack your things," Kalen said coldly. "What?" "You have 5 minutes. Take only what the boy needs. Everything else will be burned." "I'm not going with you," Julian said, clutching Leo tighter. Kalen turned, his expression stony. "You think you have a choice? You think I will leave my son here? Or his mother?" He stepped closer, towering over them. "You forfeited your right to choose the day you ran. Now you are coming home. If you resist, I will carry you. If you scream, I will silence you. But you are leaving this place." Julian looked into those silver eyes and saw the immovability of a mountain. He realized then that the chase was over. He had been caught. But as he looked at Kalen, he didn't just see a captor. He saw a man who had just discovered the one thing in the world that mattered more than power. The penthouse was exactly as Julian remembered it. Cold, expansive, and breathtakingly expensive. It was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the city skyline. A golden cage in the sky. The drive had been silent. Leo had fallen asleep in the back of the armored SUV, oblivious to the fact that his life had changed irrevocably. Now, he was tucked into a bed in a guest room that was larger than Julian's entire apartment, guarded by 2 men outside the door. Julian stood in the center of the massive living room, his arms crossed, shivering slightly despite the climate control. Kalen stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, pouring a glass of amber whiskey. "Drink," Kalen said, holding the glass out without turning around. "I don't want your drink," Julian snapped. "I want to know what happens now. Are we prisoners? Are you going to lock us away?" Kalen turned, taking a slow sip. "You are not a prisoner, Julian. You are my partner. And Leo. Leo is my legacy. We are not partners. We haven't been partners since the night you tortured that man in our living room," Julian reminded him, the memory still fresh and visceral. "That man was an assassin sent to kill you," Kalen said calmly. "I did what was necessary." "You enjoyed it," Julian countered. Kalen set the glass down with a sharp clink. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbing Julian by the chin and forcing him to look up. "I do what I must to keep what is mine breathing. You think the world is kind? You think your little apartment was safe? I found you because your landlord sold your information to a debt collector who works for the Corsetti family. If I hadn't kicked that door down tonight, they would have. And they wouldn't have hesitated to hurt Leo to get to me." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "You're lying." "I never lie to you," Kalen said, his thumb brushing over Julian's lower lip. The touch was electric, sparking a dormant heat in Julian's belly that he hated himself for feeling. "I am a monster, Julian. I have never claimed otherwise. But I am the monster that keeps the other monsters away from you." Julian pulled away, turning his back. So what now? We live here, under your thumb, waiting for the next war. Now, Kalen said, his voice dropping to a seductive purr, we raise our son. And you remember why you fell in love with me before the fear took over. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Kalen didn't lock Julian in. He didn't need to. The security detail was heavy, and the reality of the Corsetti threat was confirmed when Julian saw the news of a fire at his old apartment complex the day after they left. Kalen had saved them, but the domestic dynamic was fraught with tension. Kalen treated Leo with a terrifying gentleness. The ruthless Mafia Don would sit on the floor, in his three-piece suits, stacking blocks with the toddler. He bought Leo everything. Toys, clothes, a pony that Julian had to sternly refuse. It was confusing. Julian watched from the doorway as Kalen taught Leo how to hold a spoon properly, his large, scarred hands guiding the toddler's tiny fingers with infinite patience. He likes you, Julian said one evening, breaking the silence. Kalen looked up from the storybook he was reading to Leo. He is of my blood. It is natural. He doesn't know you're a criminal, Julian muttered. He knows I am his father, Kalen corrected. He stood up, the book forgotten, and walked over to Julian. The air shifted, heavy with intent. And what about you, Julian? Do you still hate me? Julian looked up at the man who had been his world, then his nightmare, and now something in between. I don't know. Good, Kalen murmured, leaning down. Hate is passion. Indifference is what I fear. As long as you feel something, I can work with it. He didn't kiss Julian. He simply inhaled his scent, which Julian realized with shame had sweetened in response to Kalen's proximity, and walked away. It was a slow burn, a game of patience that Kalen was winning. The fragile peace shattered 2 months later. It was a gala, a mandatory appearance for the Vane family. Kalen had insisted Julian attend, marking his official return to the fold. Leo was safe in the penthouse with a team of guards. The ballroom was a sea of silk and diamonds, hiding the rot of the criminal underworld. Julian stood by Kalen's side, dressed in a white suit that contrasted sharply with Kalen's black. They were a vision of power, the alpha and his omega. Smile, Kalen whispered against his ear, his hand firm on the small of Julian's back. They are watching for weakness. I'm not weak, Julian muttered, chin high. I know. Kalen's voice held a note of pride. That is why you are mine. The attack happened during the toast. There was no warning, just the shattering of the skylight and the sudden descent of figures in tactical gear. The Corsetti family had made their move, striking at the heart of the Vane leadership. Chaos erupted. Gunfire drowned out the screams. Kalen moved faster than humanly possible. He shoved Julian behind a marble pillar, his body a human shield. He drew his weapon, his face transforming from aristocratic indifference to demonic fury. Stay down, Kalen roared, firing 2 precise shots that dropped an attacker midair. Kalen! Julian screamed as a bullet chipped the marble inches from Kalen's head. I said stay down. Kalen looked back, his eyes wild. I have to clear a path. If anything happens to me, you run to the east exit. My driver is there. Go to Leo. Do you understand? No. Julian grabbed Kalen's sleeve. I'm not leaving you. The admission hung in the air between them, louder than the gunfire. Kalen froze for a microsecond, a look of raw shock crossing his face. You love me, Kalen said, breathless. Yes, you idiot. Now don't die, Julian shouted, pulling a small handgun from his own ankle holster, a trick Kalen had taught him years ago. Kalen grinned, a feral, terrifying smile. That's my boy. The next 10 minutes were a blur of violence and adrenaline. Kalen was a whirlwind of death, moving with a lethal grace that cleared the room. But he never strayed more than 5 feet from Julian. Every shot he took was calculated to protect his partner. When the last assailant fell, silence descended, heavy and thick with the smell of gunpowder. Kalen stood amidst the carnage, chest heaving, blood dripping from a graze on his cheek. He turned to Julian, who was shaking, gun still gripped in his hand. Kalen holstered his weapon and crossed the distance between them. He didn't speak. He simply grabbed Julian and crushed his mouth against his. The kiss was desperate, tasting of iron and adrenaline. It was a confirmation of life. Julian melted into it, his hands clutching Kalen's ruined suit jacket. All the anger, all the years of running, dissolved in the face of the undeniable truth. They were two halves of the same chaotic soul. Kalen pulled back, resting his forehead against Julian's. It's over. The Corsettis are finished. I will burn the rest of them to the ground tonight. Let's go home, Julian whispered, trembling. To Leo. Kalen's expression softened. He picked Julian up bridal style, ignoring the gasps of the surviving guests. Yes, let's go home. Later that night, after the adrenaline had faded and the wounds were bandaged, they stood over Leo's crib. The boy was sleeping soundly, clutching a stuffed wolf Kalen had bought him. Kalen wrapped his arms around Julian's waist from behind, resting his chin on Julian's shoulder. The contact was grounding, heavy with possessive affection. I thought running would save him, Julian whispered into the darkness. But I realized tonight, he's safer with the wolf guarding the door than he is out there alone. Kalen kissed the sensitive spot behind Julian's ear. I will never let anything touch either of you again. I will burn the world before I let you go. I know. Julian leaned back into the embrace. I'm done running, Kalen. Good. Kalen turned Julian around, his silver eyes glowing in the dark. Because I'm done chasing. Now I intend to keep. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Kalen destroy everyone to protect his family, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a husband who was a monster to the world, but a savior to you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.